learned something really crazy the other day that I felt needed an entire video to look into and discuss and see what could be going on. In my previous video, I showed the complete solve of how to insta-kill the boss on Horizon and skip the entire boss fight. These guys here figured it out, and they've been using it for speed runs, and they have a full strategy that's really in-depth and detailed, and I have that all in that previous video. They spent like a solid 16 hours figuring out how to insta-kill the boss in really early rounds. They did it on like round 12. It was crazy. While they were working on this strategy, one of them, Ryan, shout out to him, developed a program that would show the amount of damage that they were doing to the boss. And what they learned based on the code that they had read, you need to do 1 million damage to the boss to insta-kill him and end the boss fight early. It's a total legit method. It's actually in the code and an intended mechanic for DE boss fight. While they were messing around with the program that shows the damage that they do and trying to get up to 1 million, they had noticed that there was something strange going on with one of the bows. So for the Storm, the Void, and the Fire bow, when you do a charge shot, it's going to do the amount of damage that the zombies have as health on that round. So if the zombies have 50,000 health, a charge shot from those 3 bows will be doing 50,000 damage. It scales up and stays with their health. And if you want to one-shot the boss with those 3 bows, you have to go to round 83 because the zombies' health is a little over 1 million at that point, and the bows are doing over 1 million damage with one charge shot. And yeah, you can end the boss fight early that way. But there is something entirely different going on with the wolf bow. The wolf bow charge shot scales only half of the zombie's health. So if you're on a round where the zombie's health is 50,000, the charge shot from the wolf bow will only be doing like 25,000 damage. It's only half the health and kind of a ripoff considering how powerful the other 3 bows are. But it gets even worse. If you take the wolf bow into the boss fight and do a charge shot on the keeper boss, you're gonna only do 2 damage, and it doesn't matter what round it is. I'll show you guys that in the boss fight and showing the amount of damage it's doing in just a moment. But if you're curious to know how much damage the charge shots are doing from the other 3 bows, you can go to this website here, zombicus.com, because those bows scale with the zombies' health. You can just go to whatever round you want, see how much health the zombies have, and that's how much damage those 3 bows are doing. Again, these are for the charge shots and not just the single shots from those bows. So Ryan took me into the boss fight and loaded up his programming that shows the damage that you do to the boss. And again, this is how they develop their strategy. And I've brought in the wolf bow, and we're just in the first phase here, and we're going to plant the rags, and I'm going to do a charge shot here to the keeper boss, and you can see that it shows 1 and 1, which is only 2 damage from this bow, and we're even on round 83, and this is the round where the other 3 bows would be doing over 1 million damage and insta-killing this boss. These guys were joking around, but they felt bad for any player that's ever brought in the wolf bow to the boss fight and hasn't come out alive, because you're not going to be able to kill this keeper boss. I had them dig deeper into the code to maybe understand what's going on. Was this a mistake? Why is it only doing 2 damage to the keeper boss and only half damage to the zombie's health? They looked at all the coding for all 4 bows, and one of them believes that this was intentional for the wolf bow, that it wasn't an oversight, it wasn't a mistake, that this is how they intended for the wolf bow to operate, and to be very weak against the keeper boss and to be not so great against the zombies compared to the other bows. And if you look at it that way, it makes a lot of sense. If you understand Jason and his thinking and how deep these guys go with lore and storyline, it kind of fits. And I'll explain what I mean. So the Wolfbow quest revolves around the king that has fallen and died. He's buried in the Undercroft, and you're following around one of his direwolf's spirits. You're collecting bones, putting them back into the burial chamber, and it seems like the bow is comprised of these spirits in some way. And that could be the reason why the bow is so weak compared to the others and does nothing in the boss fight. I'll show you what I mean, but first, while digging into this information, I was messing around with this program here that shows all the triggers to everything on the map, and I noticed one of the steps of the wolf bow quest that I've been doing wrong all this time, and I made a tweet to see if other people had the wrong idea as well. It's the step where you've collected all the bones and then you need to wall run and shoot the Wrath of the Ancient's bow at the burial chamber and get that platform to rise up to collect that arrow. I had always thought that you had to shoot inside of the tomb, but based on this program here, it's showing, yeah, it's actually above the tomb. It's a giant rectangle. It does encompass that entire symbol above the tomb. And this works for people that think that it is the tomb because that splash damage is definitely hitting that at some point and it's triggering that platform to raise. I wanted to see how many people thought that it was the tomb that you shot inside of, and it looks like almost 40% of the people that posted and responded to this Twitter thinks that you shoot inside the tomb and not actually above it on the symbols. This is actually good news because I always found it a little bit tricky to try to get the arrow inside of the tomb. It is so much easier now knowing that you just have to blast an arrow at the top of the wall. And this is just like that other video I made where we thought you had to activate the Carnorium to open that floor safe in the lab when you go back in time. But you're actually putting a key card in a machine next to it, but because that trigger is so close together, it looks like it's the book. Now, half of you are going to know that it's the symbol that you shoot with the Wrath of the Ancient's bow, but the other half is going to be like me and think that you have to shoot in the tomb. And it's nice to actually visually see the entire trigger and see where you actually need to shoot. Now, going back and trying to understand why the wolf bow is so weak compared to the other three bows and completely useless in the boss fight, you could look at the storyline that is around the bow. So the first step is to interact with 4 paintings that tell this backstory of the king and his direwolves. The first one is the king with his direwolves by his side, Skadi and Odin. Now, I don't know if a lot of people know that those are those wolves' names, but they are. Some people may or may not know that. I had to do a little bit of digging into the code to find their names, but that's just a fun fact. And Treyarch goes so deep with lore and storyline that the dog that you follow around is Skadi, and Skadi's from Norse mythology, and it's related to bow hunting and the mountains and snow. That's some seriously detailed information, and they don't really tell you that. Like, they don't throw that in your face, but they've developed this huge backstory for these steps that you're doing that you're not completely aware of. And that is what makes me think that the story surrounding the king and the direwolves is the reason why the bow is weak against the zombies and completely useless against the keeper boss. Continuing the story here, the king is riding into battle with his wolves, and then the next painting you see the castle burning and being destroyed by the apothecans. Then the final painting is the king dying. Now, they were originally going to put the 2 wolves dying next to him, but they've got Arthur here instead. So you've got the king and his direwolves defeated by the apothecans, and if the bow is essentially made up of their spirits, then it makes sense that it would be pretty weak against these apothecans still. So with it doing no damage in the boss fight, that makes sense to me. And with it being weak against the zombies, yeah, it just fits the storyline. I kind of went back and forth thinking maybe this was just an oversight in the coding, but that's a major oversight to miss, to make this bow completely useless in some instances. And this is all just speculation. We'll never know. It would be cool to think that it was the storyline that made it suck, and to think that it was just a massive oversight in the coding. That would be bad. But let me know what you guys think about this. I'll see you next video.